Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The conference room at Fort Bragg smelled of strong coffee and nervous ambition. Morning light cut through vertical blinds like silent bars, stripping the polished table where 5 candidates waited for their security clearance interviews. Every movement carried the tension of people trying not to seem nervous while quietly sizing each other up. Maya Torres sat at the far end, last chair, least attention. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back into a simple ponytail, no jewelry, no visible rank. Just a gray blazer over a white blouse. She looked like someone who'd come to audit the meeting, not compete for a position inside one of the most selective joint task force programs in the country. The others were younger, fresh academy graduates who spoke in crisp, confident tones that came from growing up inside the system. One boasted about his father's post at the Pentagon. Another mentioned her family's long line of Army service. Their laughter was controlled, rehearsed. They carried themselves like they already belonged. Maya didn't. She sat quietly, hands folded over a slim folder. Her eyes drifted, not nervously but methodically taking in the room. The one-way mirror, the surveillance camera in the corner, the clock whose ticking filled the pauses in conversation. No one here knew her. No one had reason to. The door opened with military precision. Lieutenant Derek Vance entered like a man who'd never once questioned his authority. Late 30s, squared jaw, uniform pressed so sharply the creases could cut glass. His ribbons were plentiful, though they spoke more of administrative service than combat. Still, he wore them like armor. "Good morning," he said, without warmth. "I'm Lieutenant Vance. I'll be conducting today's security clearance interviews for the Joint Task Force Integration Program." He set a tablet and a stack of folders on the table. "We'll proceed alphabetically." The room straightened. One by one, the candidates were called: Anderson, Bennett, Hoffman. Each disappeared into the side office and returned 20 minutes later, visibly relieved. When Vance finally looked up from his tablet, his tone carried the faint irritation of a man ready for lunch. "Tours." Maya rose, calm, collected. Inside the smaller interview room, the air felt tighter, deliberate. 3 chairs, 1 table, a recording light in the corner. The mirror across from her reflected a composed woman who appeared unthreatening, even ordinary. That was fine. She learned long ago how to let people underestimate her. "Sit," Vance instructed, not bothering to. He preferred the view from above. She sat. He opened her file, flipping pages with theatrical patience. Maya Torres, 34, high school diploma, no college degree. He paused, scanning. Employment history, several gaps, long gaps. His eyes rose, sharp. "Care to explain these periods of unemployment?" "Those weren't unemployment periods," Maya said evenly. "Those were deployments with restricted documentation." "Restricted documentation," Vance repeated, almost amused. "Convenient." He flipped another page, tapping it with his pen. "You're applying for a position requiring top-secret clearance and your resume looks like Swiss cheese. No references, no detailed history, nothing verifiable. And somehow, you think you're qualified for Joint Task Force operations." "My qualifications will speak for themselves once the proper channels verify them," Maya replied, voice calm, controlled. Vance leaned forward, placing both palms on the table. "From where I'm sitting, you look like someone trying to game the system. Maybe you heard about this position from a friend and thought you'd bluff your way in." Maya didn't blink. "I assure you, Lieutenant, I'm not gaming anything." He smiled without humor. "This task force requires individuals with documented military service, advanced training, and impeccable records. What I see is someone with missing years and vague claims about classified work." "I understand your skepticism," she said, "but my service record is classified at a level that requires additional verification protocols." He laughed, short, cutting. "Classified service record, right? Let me guess, you were Special Forces, CIA, Navy SEAL." His tone dripped sarcasm. "I've done this 6 years. You know how many people claim to have classified backgrounds they can't prove? Dozens. You know how many actually do?" She didn't respond. Vance snapped the folder shut. "Tell me something concrete. Where did you serve? What unit?" "As I mentioned, that information requires proper clearance to discuss, which you don't have, Lieutenant." Vance's jaw tightened. "This is circular logic. I can't recommend clearance without verification, and you won't provide it because you claim it's classified." "That's why reference codes exist in the file," Maya said softly. "They can be confirmed through JSOC channels." He scrolled through his tablet, frowning. "Reference codes. Yes, I see them. A random string of numbers could mean anything." He looked up sharply. "What were you really doing during these gaps? Because my guess, the truth's a little less glamorous. Maybe personal issues. Maybe you just couldn't hold a job." For the first time, something flickered in her eyes, a tiny fracture of restraint. "My service was and remains legitimate." "Then prove it," he shot back. "Give me one detail, anything." "You're asking me to violate operational security," she said quietly. "I'm asking you not to waste my time." His voice was raised now, the kind that echoed. In the corner, the red recording light blinked. Then a knock. A young sergeant stepped in, hesitant. "Lieutenant Vance, sir. Colonel Reeves would like a word. Urgent, something about reference codes." Vance frowned, irritated. "I'm in the middle of an interview." "Yes, sir," but the colonel said immediately. With visible frustration, Vance straightened. "Stay here," he ordered Maya. "Don't touch anything." The door closed behind him. Maya sat still. Her breathing stayed slow, deliberate. The mirror across from her reflected not defiance, but patience. It was the same patience that had kept her alive in places no one in this building could imagine. 5 minutes passed, 10. She glanced at the corner camera. Nothing. She'd learned how to wait, how to read silence, how to fill it with awareness instead of anxiety. When the door finally opened again, Vance returned. But something in him had shifted. The sharp arrogance had drained from his face, replaced by a thin layer of confusion. Behind him walked a silver-haired man with the stillness of real authority. Colonel Marcus Reeves. He carried a tablet of his own, and a look that silenced rooms. "Miss Torres," he greeted, his tone measured but respectful. "My apologies for the interruption." Vance stiffened. Reeves continued, "I've been reviewing your reference codes." Maya stood, "Colonel." "Lieutenant Vance," Reeves said, still not looking at him, "listen carefully." He placed his tablet on the table. "The reference codes in Miss Torres' file require verification through JSOC. I just confirmed her credentials." Vance blinked. "Sir, the codes didn't match our database." "Because you were looking in the wrong place." Reeves's tone cut clean. He turned to Maya. "For the record, Miss Torres, what unit did you serve with?" The room held its breath. Maya met his gaze. "Night Stalker Detachment, 160 SOAR." The color drained from Vance's face. Even an administrative officer knew that name. The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers. The elite helicopter crews who carried special forces into the world's darkest missions. Reeves nodded. "Roll." "Flight medic and tactical systems operator." He checked the codes on his tablet. "Operation Neptune Spear, preliminary reconnaissance support flights." "Yes, sir," she answered. That name, Neptune Spear, hung in the air like static. Even Vance knew it. The mission that killed Osama bin Laden. Reeves closed the file softly, the gesture heavier than any reprimand. "Lieutenant, did you verify these codes through proper channels before interrogating this candidate?" "I reviewed the file, sir. They didn't match." "The protocol for handling JSOC reference codes is in your manual," Reeves said sharply. "Those gaps, you saw, classified deployments. The codes exist so veterans like Miss Torres can apply without compromising operations. Maya spoke, still calm. Lieutenant Vance was following procedure, sir. Without context, my file would raise questions. Reeves regarded her for a moment, impressed by her grace. Miss Torres is being generous, Lieutenant. You should have escalated immediately. He scrolled through her verified record. 12 years with the 160th SOAR, 6 combat deployments, Distinguished Flying Cross, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor, Purple Heart. The silence in the room grew heavy. Vance looked like he might sink through the floor. Reeves continued reading. DFC citation, rescue operation, 7 special operations personnel saved. You flew 67 miles on failing systems after taking fire. Chief Warrant Officer Ramirez was primary pilot, Maya said softly. I supported on controls. The report states you took control when he was incapacitated, Reeves countered. You completed the landing. You brought them home. He set the tablet down. Miss Torres, I'm recommending you for the Senior Operations Coordinator role instead. 2 grades higher, minimal deployments, direct coordination with active units. Maya nodded once. I'd be honored, Colonel. Reeves turned toward Vance. We'll discuss this interview later. For now, understand this. People who have served in units like the 160th don't seek recognition. When someone with that background walks into your office, they deserve respect, not interrogation. Vance swallowed hard. Yes, sir. Reeves dismissed him with a look. Miss Torres, he said more gently, please wait in the conference room. We'll have your paperwork prepared within the hour. Maya gathered her folder, nodding. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk. Just quiet dignity, the kind that spoke louder than pride ever could. When the door closed behind her, Reeves turned back to the younger officer. Do you understand what just happened, Lieutenant? Vance's voice was small. I failed to verify the codes, sir. That's the administrative failure. But your real failure was something deeper. You questioned the integrity of a combat veteran who's risked more in one night than most of us will in a career. I had no way of knowing. You had every way of knowing, Reeves said, tapping the manual on the table. You just didn't look. Vance's shoulders slumped. Reeves picked up Maya's folder again. You'll write a comprehensive report on JSOC reference protocols. You'll attend retraining on classified service verification. And you'll remember this. The next person like Miss Torres deserves better. Outside, Maya waited alone. The sunlight had shifted, softer now through the blinds. She folded her hands again, quietly breathing. In that still room, where earlier she'd been underestimated, there was now something different in the air. Respect. And the faint echo of her unit name, still hanging like a quiet storm in the silence she left behind. She sat alone again, same chair, same light. But everything felt different now. The conference room that had once been heavy with skepticism now carried the quiet hum of whispered respect. Somewhere down the hall, doors opened and closed. Footsteps echoed. A few curious glances from passing staff lingered a second too long, as if word had already started spreading. Maya Torres, the nobody from the end of the table, wasn't so ordinary after all. She didn't need the validation, not really. But something about the silence felt heavier than before, a reminder of how easily dignity gets tested, even by those meant to uphold it. The door opened. A staff sergeant stepped in, short-cropped hair, steady posture, mid-40s, a face that carried the lines of field experience. Miss Torres, she said, voice respectful but warm. I'm Sergeant First Class Chen. Colonel Reeves asked me to handle your paperwork personally. Maya stood, offering her hand. Thank you, Sergeant. Chen's handshake was firm. It's an honor, ma'am. Anyone who flew with the Night Stalkers doesn't get called Miss. You earned that, ma'am, the hard way. Maya smiled faintly. Just Meyer is fine. Respectfully, ma'am, Chen said, returning the smile. That's not how the Rangers see it. I served with the 75th, 3 rotations. We ran joint ops with the 160th a few times. Maya nodded, memories flickering behind her calm expression. Different uniforms, same fight. They sat at the table while Chen opened a thick folder, the classified stamp in red bleeding through its edges. As the sergeant flipped pages, the tension began to melt into quiet professionalism. Colonel said to get you squared away for the senior operations coordinator role, Chen said. You'll have full field integration clearance, remote command authorization, and limited deployment flexibility. Limited's fine, Maya said. 12 years overseas feels like a lifetime. Chen paused, studying her for a beat. You've been through a lot. Everyone in that unit has. Chen nodded slowly. That's true, but not everyone comes back to serve again. Maya didn't respond. Her silence said enough. For years, she'd learned to live between missions, not fully home, not fully away. The hardest part wasn't the danger. It was the quiet afterward, when the adrenaline fades and all that's left are the echoes of people you couldn't save. Chen flipped another form. I was in Kandahar when your bird came in for a rescue in 2012. Valley near the border. No clean landing zone. You guys came in anyway. Maya's eyes lifted. You were groundside. Chen nodded. Ranger platoon pinned down, 3 wounded. We didn't think anyone was coming. I remember hearing the sound of rotor blades cutting through the valley. Then your hello appeared out of the fog, flying low, fast. No way you should have made that landing. Maya's voice softened. We lost power to the rear stabilizer on approach. Pilot wanted to wave off. We didn't. You saved Jackson, Chen said quietly. Sergeant First Class Thomas Jackson. He was critical. We thought we'd lose him before the flight even lifted. The name hit Maya like an echo from another lifetime. She remembered the blood loss, the field IV she started midair, the shouting, the cold metal of the bird rattling under enemy fire. Jackson survived, she asked. Chen smiled. He retired last year, Master Sergeant. Now he teaches at Ranger School, 2 kids, still has the scar, but he's alive. For a second, Maya didn't speak. Her throat tightened in a way that had nothing to do with pride, more like relief, slow and heavy. You never really know, she murmured. You do your job, hand them over, and move to the next call. You don't usually find out what happens after. Chen nodded, eyes softening. Most medics don't, but it mattered. It mattered to all of us. They went back to paperwork, signatures, initials, verifications. The quiet between them wasn't awkward. It was the quiet of understanding. Then the door opened again. An older man entered, mid to late 60s, silver hair, civilian clothes, the limp of old injuries. His eyes scanned the room until they found her. I'm looking for Maya Torres. Maya stood. That's me. He studied her face for a long moment before extending his hand. Name, Richard Blackwood, Delta Force, retired, civilian contractor now. She accepted his handshake, unsure. I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood, have we met? Afghanistan, he said simply. 2011, you probably don't remember, operation near Jalalabad, high-value target compound. Intel was wrong, we walked into double the expected hostiles. Extraction bird took an RPG. We were stuck. Maya's memory stirred. Snow, wind, a bad night. I remember the compound, she said softly. Weather was closing in. Everything was grounded, Blackwood continued. Command told us to dig in and wait 6 hours for extraction that wasn't coming. Then a woman's voice came through the radio, calm, measured. Said she was inbound in 20. Maya exhaled through her nose, remembering the static-laced call. We took fire on approach. 3 passes, Blackwood said. Under heavy fire, 3rd one held. You hovered 30 seconds, maybe less, but it was enough. We all got out. Maya looked down, jaw tightening. I wasn't the pilot. No, Blackwood agreed. But you were the one on systems and medical. You kept that bird alive. You kept us alive." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an old photograph. A man in uniform walking a woman down the aisle, two children beside them. "My daughter," he said quietly. "Those are my grandkids. I wasn't supposed to see that day. Wasn't supposed to see them born. You gave me 13 more years I shouldn't have had." Maya swallowed hard. "That's what we trained for, sir." He shook his head. "No, ma'am, you trained to fly and survive, but you chose to come for us when everyone else said the weather made it impossible. That choice, that's something you can't train." Her composure cracked for just a second. She blinked, looked away. Blackwood's voice softened. "I've spent 13 years wishing I could say this. So thank you from me, from my family, from all the families of the men you brought home that night." He nodded once, then turned to leave. As the door shut behind him, the room felt heavier. Chen looked at her. "You okay?" "Fine," Maya said, but her voice carried weight. You never really know the impact. We move on, but they remember." "They should," Chen said. "And for everyone like Blackwood who finds you, there are a dozen others who wish they could." They sat in quiet understanding. Two women who had served different roles in the same endless machine of sacrifice. When the paperwork was done, Chen gathered the forms. "Colonel Reeves wants to meet at 1400. He said your official clearance came through." "Thank you, Sergeant." Chen stood, pausing at the door. "Ma'am, if I can say something, what you did this morning with Lieutenant Vance, keeping your composure like that, that's its own kind of courage. You earned a lot of respect today, even from people who didn't deserve yours." When Chen left, Maya exhaled slowly. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a strange stillness. The kind that came after missions when everything finally stopped moving, when you had time to feel what you'd been suppressing. She looked down at her folder, now stamped cleared. A quiet vibration broke the silence. Her phone. "Unlisted number. Text message. Heard you're joining the task force. Welcome aboard. If you ever need anything, ask for Blackwood, RB." She smiled faintly, typing one line in return. "Thank you. Looking forward to working with you." The world felt small again, connected in ways only service could weave together, across years, across missions, across ghosts. When she finally stepped outside, the Carolina sun hit her face. Training grounds stretched across the horizon. Soldiers moved in coordinated rhythm, some young, some seasoned, all carrying invisible weight. For the first time in a long while, Maya felt something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Purpose. Not the kind that came from recognition or rank, the kind that came from still being needed. That afternoon, she would walk into Colonel Reeves's office and hear words that would shape the next chapter of her life. But for now, she let the wind wash through her hair and the sunlight trace the faint scars along her wrist, reminders that she'd survived everything meant to break her. Somewhere inside the building, Lieutenant Vance was probably replaying their conversation, the arrogance, the disbelief, the sudden unraveling of his assumptions. And maybe she thought that was a good thing, not humiliation but lesson. Because sometimes people had to be wrong deeply, publicly wrong, before they learned to see people for who they were, not who they appeared to be. She knew something about that. Her entire career had been lived in the spaces between what people saw and what they never would. The missions they'd never read about. The flights no one would ever document. The names carved quietly into black stone halfway across the world. That was her world, the world of the unseen, the unspoken. And for all the silence that came with it, she wouldn't have traded it for anything. As she stood watching the drills below, a distant hum of helicopter rotors cut through the air, the unmistakable sound of black hawks circling the perimeter. Maya closed her eyes for a moment. The sound wasn't noise, it was memory. It was heartbeat. And though she didn't say it out loud, She mouthed the words she'd repeated to herself through every mission, every loss, every narrow escape. Night stalkers don't quit. When she opened her eyes again, she caught her reflection in the glass door ahead, steady, unbroken, quietly formidable. Whatever waited next, she was ready. Because the world might forget her name, but the people she saved never would. And for Maya Torres, that was enough. Why was the colonel waiting for her in person? When Maya knocked precisely at 1400 hours, the door to Colonel Reeves's office was already open. He stood near the wide window overlooking Fort Bragg's training grounds, soldiers moving in formation, helicopters slicing through the bright afternoon sky. The rhythmic sound of drills carried through the glass like a heartbeat. "Come in, Miss Torres," Reeves said, gesturing toward a chair. His tone was calm, respectful. "Thank you for your patience today." Maya entered, posture straight but unforced. She moved like someone who still measured distance and exits without thinking about it. "Please," Reeves said, "have a seat." As she sat, she noticed a thick folder already open on his desk, her file. The classified version, the one with the red seal and two-level authorization tag. "I wanted to speak with you personally," Reeves began. "First, to apologize for what happened this morning. Lieutenant Vance's conduct fell short of our expectations. He failed to follow verification protocol. You deserved better." Maya's voice was even, steady. "He was doing his job as he understood it, sir. The file doesn't make things easy." "That's generous," Reeves said, "but it doesn't excuse the failure." He glanced at her file again, his expression softening slightly. "I've reviewed your complete service record, the full JSOC version. What I found is," he paused, as though words didn't quite do it justice, "remarkable." Maya didn't respond. She'd heard words like that before, usually from people who'd never seen the places her record described. 12 years with the 160th SOAR, Reeves continued. 6 combat deployments, multiple commendations, the Distinguished Flying Cross, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor, a Purple Heart. She shifted slightly. "I was part of strong teams, sir. They're the reason those medals exist." He smiled faintly. "That humility is part of why you're sitting here." He opened one of the reports. "This one," he said, tapping a page, "is from the mission where you earned your DFC. Hard reading, I'll admit." Maya didn't look at it, but she knew every line by memory. "Primary extraction bird damaged, crew under fire, 2 critical wounded. You'd been flying 11 hours already when you volunteered to take the mission." Reeves looked up at her. "You were ordered to rest. You went anyway." "There wasn't time, sir." He nodded slowly. "Made your approach under sustained fire. Hovered 43 seconds for load. Flew 67 miles on failing hydraulics after the pilot was hit." Maya spoke softly. "Chief Warrant Officer Ramirez was at the controls. I managed emergency systems." Reeves shook his head. "The report says Ramirez blacked out halfway through the descent. You took primary control. You landed the bird yourself." Silence. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for confirmation, because the truth is already heavy enough. 2 wounded survived because of that," Reeves said finally. "And your own leg injury went untreated until after the evac." "It wasn't serious," Maya said automatically. Reeves raised an eyebrow. "A through-and-through gunshot wound to the thigh qualifies as serious in my book." She smiled faintly. "I've had worse." He closed the file, leaning back. "Miss Torres, you remind me of a generation of soldiers who didn't chase recognition. You did your job quietly and moved on. That kind of professionalism, it's rare now." She looked down, hands folded. "Recognition doesn't bring anyone back." The room was quiet again. Not awkward, just honest. Reeves nodded slowly. "You said something earlier today that stuck with me. The system has protocols for exactly this situation. You were right. It also has people who don't follow them, people like Vance, who assume quiet means unqualified. He leaned forward. But we also have people like you who remind the rest of us what professionalism looks like. He pulled out a new document. This is the Senior Operations Coordinator role I mentioned earlier. It's a hybrid command position, strategic oversight, mission planning, coordination with active units. No frequent deployments but high responsibility. You'd be liaising with both JSOC and CIA operations cells. Maya scanned the document. Will I have operational autonomy on mission design? Within scope, yes, Reeves said. You'd review mission proposals, assess risk, and coordinate with field officers. You'd also mentor younger planners like Vance, ironically enough. Her lips curved slightly. That might be good for him. I agree. Can you start Monday? That works well, sir. Reeves nodded, then hesitated. There's one more matter, Lieutenant Vance. Maya looked up. I had a long discussion with him, Reeves continued. He knows he mishandled your interview. The question is whether you want this recorded as a formal disciplinary action or handled through corrective training. She paused. What would disciplinary action do? It would go in his record, slow his promotion, possibly disqualify him from certain assignments. She thought for a moment before answering. I think he learned more from that experience than punishment would ever teach him. He made mistakes trying to protect selection integrity. The system corrected itself. That's enough. Reeves regarded her thoughtfully. You're showing him more grace than he showed you. Maya nodded. I've made mistakes too, sir. I had leaders who corrected me without ending my career. It made me better. If Vance learns from this, he'll be better. That serves everyone. Reeves smiled slightly. Not many people would respond that way. You remind me of why I joined the service, to work with people who still value dignity. At that moment, Sergeant Chen knocked and stepped in. Sir, clearance packet's complete. Reeves took the folder signed and handed it to Maya. Welcome to the team officially. She accepted the papers. Thank you, sir. He stood. I'll have your access credentials and briefings scheduled. The team's been waiting for leadership like yours. Quiet leadership. The kind that doesn't have to shout to be followed. Understood, Maya said. As she turned to leave, Reeves added, and Miss Torres, that grace you showed today. That's leadership too. Don't underestimate how powerful that is. She nodded once. I won't, sir. Outside his office, the hallways buzzed with the quiet rhythm of base life. Soldiers moving between rooms, the echo of boots on polished floors, clipped voices over radios. Maya's steps were slower now, not from fatigue but from reflection. For the first time in years, she felt something that resembled closure. Not for the missions she'd flown, but for the pieces of herself she'd kept hidden behind classified silence. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about using what she knew to build something better for the next generation who'd stand where she once stood. As she reached the exit, a familiar figure stood waiting near the corridor wall, Lieutenant Vance. His uniform still crisp, but his demeanor had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something humbler. Miss Torres, he said, straightening, may I have a word? She stopped. Of course, Lieutenant. I wanted to apologize, he said quietly. For this morning, I was wrong about your record, about my assumptions. I misjudged you. She studied him for a moment. You followed procedure as you knew it. That's no excuse, he said quickly. I should have recognized the indicators. I should have treated you with respect from the start. Maya nodded, acknowledging that matters. What you do next matters more. I plan to learn from it, he said. Colonel Reeves assigned me to revise the JSOC code manual. I'll make sure no one repeats my mistake. That's a good start. He hesitated, then added, when Colonel Reeves told me your background, I realized something. People like me, we train to lead. People like you are the standard we train for. Maya's voice softened. We all serve in different ways, Lieutenant. Just make sure your way honors the people who came before you. He nodded firmly. Yes, ma'am. She offered a small smile, the kind that carried more forgiveness than words. Take care of yourself, Vance. Yes, ma'am. He stepped aside, letting her pass. As she walked away, he exhaled, long and slow, and looked down the hall toward Colonel Reeves's office. For the first time in his career, he realized leadership wasn't about authority. It was about humility, about knowing when you'd been wrong and having the courage to admit it. Back in Reeves's office, the colonel watched the exchange through the glass wall. He smiled faintly. He'd seen countless soldiers break under ego. Few ever learned to rise above it. Later that night, Maya sat in her small on-base quarters, unpacking a single duffel bag. She placed her folder neatly on the desk, next to a framed photograph, not of family, but of her old unit. The 160th sore patch half faded from years in sand and rain. The picture showed 5 people standing beside a helicopter at sunrise. 3 of them were gone now. 2 others had retired. She traced her finger along their faces. Still here, she whispered. The night outside was quiet. Somewhere far away, she could hear the faint hum of rotor blades from the flight line. It was a sound she'd never stop hearing, not really. It wasn't noise, it was memory. It was proof that some parts of you never leave the sky. Her phone buzzed again. A new message from an unfamiliar encrypted channel. Welcome to the front office, Night Stalker, RB. Maya smiled faintly, replying with a single word. Ready. She leaned back in her chair, the quiet stretching between heartbeats. Outside, a helicopter passed overhead, its shadow gliding across the window, silent, fleeting, almost like a ghost. Maya watched it disappear beyond the tree line. Then, quietly to herself, she said the words that had carried her through every storm, every loss, every test. Dignity doesn't need to speak, it just acts. And in that moment, she wasn't a candidate or a coordinator or even a legend. She was just Maya Tors, a woman who'd served in silence and taught everyone around her what that silence truly meant. Why did the room go quiet when she walked in? Monday morning came with a sky too clear for comfort, the kind of crisp blue that made Fort Bragg look deceptively calm, like a photograph of order masking 1,000 moving parts underneath. The operations wing buzzed with controlled energy, screens lit with flight paths, encrypted comms and satellite maps. Analysts huddled around glowing monitors. Radios crackled in short, coded bursts. Maya stood at the entrance, simple black slacks, pressed shirt, hair tied back. No insignia, no visible reminder of what she'd done. Only the quiet authority that came from someone who didn't need to prove anything. A few heads turned when she entered. Conversations dimmed slightly. Not out of curiosity, but uncertainty. The kind that fills a room when people can't quite decide who the new arrival is or how much power she holds. Colonel Reeves appeared from a side corridor, his expression calm but purposeful. "Morning, Miss Tors. Welcome to your new post." "Morning, sir," she replied. He led her into the briefing room, long table, 12 chairs, walls lined with operation maps. At the far end, a group of officers and civilians sat waiting. Among them, Lieutenant Vance. His eyes lifted briefly when she entered, and for once there was no defensiveness there. Only respect. Reeves gestured. "Everyone, this is Maya Tors, Senior Operations Coordinator. She'll be overseeing field coordination and mission integration for the Joint Task Force." A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the group. A few polite nods, a few uncertain glances. Reeves continued. "Some of you may already be aware of her service record. Most of it you won't find in any public file. What matters is this: she's been where our teams go. She's flown into conditions most of us would call impossible. She knows what happens when the plan doesn't survive contact with reality." He paused, letting that sink in. So when she speaks, listen. Reeves turned to Maya. It's all yours. She stepped forward, unhurried. Her voice, when she spoke, carried a quiet strength that filled the room without raising volume. Thank you, Colonel. She looked around, meeting each face, some young, some seasoned, all expectant. I'm not here to lecture. I'm here to make sure what happens out there, she nodded toward the map, is backed by what happens in here. A pause. Out there, you don't get do-overs. You get one shot. That means every plan we make must be grounded in reality, not assumptions, not theories. One officer, a man with sharp glasses and an air of academic confidence, raised his hand. Ma'am, with respect, most of our flight data comes from simulations and predictive models. Field variability is unpredictable. Maya nodded. You're right. Field conditions are unpredictable. That's why models are only as good as the people who understand what happens when they fail. She stepped closer to the digital map. Take Operation Echo Ridge. Wind shear near the extraction point. Terrain elevation underestimated by 200 feet. A model might call that a statistical anomaly. A pilot calls it a death trap. Silence. Her tone softened. My job isn't to challenge your expertise. It's to bridge it with lived experience, to turn probability into preparation. Something shifted in the room. Respect doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a shared understanding. When the meeting ended, Colonel Reeves lingered near the doorway as the team dispersed. You had them, he said. All of them, even the ones who thought they knew better. I wasn't trying to have them, Maya said. Just trying to make sure they listen when it counts. That's exactly why they will, Reeves said. As they exited, Vance approached. Ma'am, he said, careful but sincere. Excellent briefing. Thank you, Lieutenant. He hesitated. If it's all right, I'd like to sit in on your coordination sessions. I think I could learn a lot. She studied him not to intimidate but to read his intent. Learning's good, Lieutenant. Just remember, listening is part of it. Yes, ma'am, he said. That's what I'm here to do. That afternoon, Maya found herself alone in her new office, small, functional, the kind of space meant for quiet work rather than command. A single window overlooked the flight line. She could see the faint outline of helicopters parked under the sun, their rotors glinting like black blades. She stood there for a long moment. Every sound outside, the rumble of engines, the clank of metal, brought memories uninvited. There had been a time when that sound was her heartbeat, when every mission began and ended with that familiar vibration beneath her boots. She missed it, not the danger but the purpose, the simplicity of knowing exactly what needed to be done. Now, her battlefield was a table covered in charts and data, but lives still depended on her judgment, even if the trigger she pulled now was a digital one. The door opened softly. It was Chen, carrying a stack of mission drafts. Ma'am, Colonel Reeves asked me to deliver these. Upcoming coordination exercises. You'll probably want to adjust flight zones. The parameters look optimistic. Maya smiled faintly. That's military code for unrealistic. Chen smirked. Yes, ma'am. Maya took the files, scanning them. Thank you, Sergeant. How are you settling in? Still getting used to the air conditioning, ma'am. Last 2 years were field duty. Feels strange sitting still. Strange doesn't mean bad, Maya said. Chen hesitated. If you don't mind me saying, ma'am, the way you handled that first meeting, it reminded me of the best leaders I ever had. The quiet kind. Maya looked up. Quiet's the only way you hear what matters. Chen nodded slowly. That's true, ma'am. As she left, Maya returned to the window. The sunlight shifted, painting faint patterns across the glass, the kind that made you realize how much the world kept moving even when you'd stopped. Later that week, the first simulation exercise began. Teams assembled in the operations center. Monitors displayed live data, weather feeds, and digital terrain models. Maya stood near the center console, headset on, watching her new team run coordination drills for a mock extraction scenario. Everything was running smoothly, too smoothly. "Wind readings at Sector 9, she said suddenly. "Recalculate at real-time gust intervals." The technician frowned. "Ma'am, the simulation already compensates for that. Not if you're flying at night. Low altitude, 30 miles an hour crosswind." He hesitated, adjusting. "Ma'am." Numbers flickered. Within seconds, the simulated chopper lost altitude and clipped the ridge line. Gasps from the control staff. Maya folded her arms. That's what happens when the model forgets the mountain doesn't care about math. A pause, then she added softly, "Rerun it. But this time adjust for the wind the pilot feels, not the one the instrument reports." They did, and this time the bird cleared the ridge cleanly. From the corner of the room, Colonel Reeves watched quietly, expression unreadable. When the session ended, he stepped beside her. "You just taught them more in 10 minutes than 3 weeks of manuals ever could." Maya shrugged. "Experience just gives you different instincts. The air tells you things data doesn't." He nodded. "We needed that here, real perspective." As they exited the operations room, Reeves stopped. "How does it feel being back in it? Not in the cockpit, but here, shaping the missions." She looked out the window where a helicopter lifted into the distance. "It feels right," she said softly. "Different, but right." Reeves smiled faintly. "I'm glad to hear that." That evening, long after most of the base had gone quiet, Maya stayed behind. The operations center lights glowed dim blue against the darkened hallways. She moved slowly between the empty desks, her hand brushing the smooth metal surface of the mission table. So many lives had begun and ended on maps like these. Her phone buzzed. "RB, heard you're running the sims now. Making any enemies yet?" She smiled, typing back. "MT, only the lazy ones." "RB, good, keep them honest. Quiet leadership is louder than any speech." She set the phone down, that familiar warmth of camaraderie flickering in her chest. Maybe she'd never fly again, but maybe that wasn't the point anymore. Maybe the mission had just changed shape. Outside, the night air carried the faint hum of engines starting for late-night drills. She stepped out to the balcony, letting the cool air hit her face. Down below, crews moved like shadows under floodlights, organized chaos, the kind she'd once lived inside. A distant rotor spun up, low and deep. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the vibration through the ground. It wasn't memory this time. It was continuity. Different role, same mission. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet, more to herself than anyone else. "People think leadership is loud, but real command," she paused, the hum filling the silence. "It's the calm before the storm, not the storm itself." In that moment, she wasn't reminiscing anymore. She was leading again, just from a different altitude. And though the years and the scars had changed her, one truth still held steady like the night sky above the field. Some warriors never stop serving, they just change where they stand. What happens when calm gets tested? The day started like any other: meetings, logistics, endless screens. But by mid-morning, something in the air had shifted. The quiet hum of the operations floor had turned sharp, like static before a storm. Maya felt it before anyone said a word. Years in combat zones had tuned her instincts to tension, the kind that doesn't announce itself with shouting, but with silence. Colonel Reeves entered the operations center, phone in hand, expression grave. "We've got a situation," he said, his voice low but clear. "Unscheduled field contact. Special Operations Team call sign Spectre 2 off communication grid in northern Syria. Last transmission, compromised exfil route, requesting immediate overwatch." The room fell still. Reeves handed her the tablet. "You're coordinating. Real-time feed from JSOC will patch in 30 seconds." Maya took it without hesitation. Her fingers moved fast, connecting data feeds, pulling maps, aligning weather grids. Within a minute, the big wall screen came alive. Grainy satellite visuals, flashing GPS markers, wind readouts. The call sign blinked red. Team of 6, Maya read aloud. Extraction planned via rotor drop at 21:30 local. Terrain, steep ravine, limited visibility. They've lost one vehicle. Vance stepped forward from the comms desk. Ma'am, nearest bird 70 miles out. Weather systems closing fast, ground extraction may be impossible. Maya's eyes stayed on the map. Who's the flight lead? Captain Lorne, Night Stalker. That single word shifted the room's temperature. Every pilot who'd ever flown with the 160th carried that weight. They didn't quit, but they didn't always come back either. Get me his channel, she said. Already trying, ma'am. Storm interference. She exhaled slowly. Then we go old school, line relay, patch through satellite bounce via alternate band 9. Vance hesitated. Ma'am, that's not in protocol, I know, she finished. Do it anyway. He obeyed. Within seconds, static filled the speakers, then a distorted voice broke through. Command, this is Spectre 2. Copy if you can. Maya leaned forward. Spectre 2, this is Fort Bragg operations. We have you faint but readable. What's your status? Taking fire on Ridge 39. One wounded vehicle down. We're low on ammo. Can't hold much longer. Copy, she said calmly. Hold position, we're working extraction. Reeves moved closer. Options. Limited, she said. Wind shears pushing 60 knots at altitude. If we send a bird, it's a one-way risk. Reeves frowned. You know what that means. I do. The words were calm, but inside, her pulse had quickened. The kind of rhythm she hadn't felt since her own flying days. The kind that reminded her how close death and duty could live together. Ma'am, Vance said, JSOC's recommending delay until weather clears. She turned to him, eyes sharp but steady. If we wait, they die. The valley will flood when that storm hits. No delay. He hesitated, voice soft, but... Lieutenant, she said quietly, you've read my file. You know what that storm feels like up there. Now imagine being pinned under it, bleeding, listening to the sound of a chopper that never comes. That silence shut down any argument. Reeves exhaled. You're calling the shot, Tors. What's your play? Maya's eyes locked on the terrain feed. We'll reroute through corridor Bravo 7 under the wind shear line. Bring in 2 support birds for decoy flare spread. The main extraction bird will come in low, terrain following, east to west. That's below safe altitude, one analyst muttered. It's also below radar visibility, Maya countered. We're not trying to impress anyone, we're trying to get them home. She keyed her comm. Flight command, this is operations. Confirm nearest Night Stalker units. The voice crackled back. We've got Falcon 3 and Talon 1 prepped, ma'am. Pilots are on standby. Assign Talon 1 as lead, she said. Tell them they're flying into a storm with zero margin. They'll need every ounce of instinct they've got. Reeves gave her a look that said everything: trust, risk, approval. It's your call. Maya took a breath. Launch window, 15 minutes. The room came alive with motion, people moving fast, voices overlapping. Orders transmitted, coordinates confirmed. As the chaos swelled, she stayed centered, the calm at the eye of the storm. Her voice cut through the noise. Flight command, I want full telemetry feedback. I want wind readings every 30 seconds, and I want comms open the entire flight. Copy that. Reeves leaned toward her. You've done this before. Too many times, she said softly. Minutes later, the monitors showed liftoff. 3 green markers rising into the storm's shadow, Falcon 3, Talon 1, and a decoy support bird. Rain streaked across the satellite feed like static. The wind speeds climbed. The line between bravery and recklessness blurred. Maya watched every fluctuation, every dip in altitude. "Steady," she murmured, not into the mic, just to herself. Then the first crack of interference. Talon 1 to base, turbulence increasing, visibility dropping to near zero. "Copy," Maya said, calm as glass. "Adjust bearing 5 degrees south. Use ridge as windbreak. You'll have 20 seconds of visual on flare grid." A pause, then the pilot's voice again, steadier. "Copy that command." Reeves watched her with quiet awe. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't flustered. Every instruction came out low and measured, like she'd rehearsed for this moment her entire life. Another voice came through. "Spectre 2 to command, enemy fire intensifying. We're taking rounds." "Talon 1, Maya said, increase speed, you're 2 clicks out. Pop flares in sequence Echo 1 through 4, make your descent." Static then, "Copy, beginning descent." The markers on the screen dipped sharply, 1, 2, 3. Reeves whispered, "God help them." "God helps those who don't quit," Maya said quietly. The next 30 seconds felt like eternity. The storm signal nearly blacked out. Then, suddenly, all 3 markers converged. "Spectre 2 aboard," came the breathless transmission. "All 6 accounted for, 1 wounded, we're clear." Cheers broke through the operations center. Clapping, exhalations, the collective relief of people who'd been holding their breath too long. But Maya didn't cheer. She just closed her eyes for a brief moment, exhaling softly. "Bring them home," she said. Minutes later, telemetry confirmed all aircraft returning to base. Reeves turned toward her. "That was incredible. You just saved 6 lives." Maya shook her head. "No, sir, they saved them. I just made sure someone was listening." He studied her, the calm after the storm. "You're wasted behind a desk, Tours." She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but this desk saves people too." Reeves nodded. "You did good." When the room cleared, only she and Vance remained. He stood near the monitor, silent, watching the replay feed, the red dots, the storm, the rescue. He turned to her, voice quiet. "I thought you were being reckless at first. I thought waiting for clear skies was safer." "Safe doesn't always mean right," she said. He nodded slowly. "I understand that now." "Good," she said, "because someday you'll have to make the call and there won't be time for permission." Vance met her eyes. "I hope I make it half as well as you did." "Just remember," she said softly, "fear's fine. Arrogance is. The first keeps you alive, the second gets people killed." He nodded again, absorbing every word like scripture. When he left, Maya sat alone for the first time in hours. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by that familiar quiet ache, the one that always followed survival. Her reflection in the dark screen stared back, steady, older but still alive. She thought of the men out there, soaked and shaken but breathing. She thought of every mission she'd flown where the outcome had gone the other way. Then her phone buzzed. "RB, heard about Spectre 2. You still make the impossible look procedural." She smiled faintly. "MT, luck favors the persistent." "RB and the patient, proud of you, Valkyrie." She froze for a moment. That name, Valkyrie. No one had called her that in years. It wasn't in any file. It was her call sign, whispered only across encrypted channels, in the air between life and death. Her hands rested on the desk, still for a long moment. The war might have ended for her, but some things didn't fade. The memories, the bonds, they were tattooed into silence. Later, as the rain outside softened into mist, Maya walked out onto the empty tarmac. The smell of jet fuel mixed with wet concrete. Floodlights threw long shadows across the field. Above, the clouds split, just enough to reveal a sliver of moonlight. She looked up, following the thin line of sky visible between the dark. Somewhere out there, Talon 1 was returning. Somewhere, a medic she'd trained was patching a wound in midair. And she felt it again, that quiet sense of purpose that made everything else fade. She wasn't flying anymore, but she was still carrying them home. When she finally turned to go, her reflection in the glass door caught her eye, calm, dignified, silent. The same kind of silence that had made an entire room stop talking the day she'd said her unit name. Some lessons don't fade with time. Some people don't either. And as she walked down the corridor, her footsteps echoing softly through the empty hall, one thought followed her like a whisper from another life. Leadership isn't about rank, it's about responsibility. And Maya Tor's Valkyrie 1 carried it like a promise. What does strength sound like when it isn't shouted? 3 weeks had passed since the Spectre 2 rescue. The base had returned to its routine rhythm, drills, simulations, planning sessions, but the air around the operations wing carried a new energy. Maya Tor's had become the quiet center of it. Every morning she arrived before dawn, coffee in hand, reviewing the overnight reports alone in her office. She didn't need to assert authority. Her presence did it for her. The others had stopped questioning her recommendations. Even the most seasoned analysts had learned to listen when she leaned forward and said, simply, "Check that again." Because she was never guessing, she was remembering. This morning she stood by the window, watching the sky shift from gray to gold over the training fields. Her reflection merged with the glass, half inside, half outside, like she was still living between two worlds. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Lieutenant Vance stepped through the doorway, holding a tablet and a folder. His tone carried none of the arrogance he once had, just quiet focus. "Morning, ma'am. I finished reviewing the new extraction drills. Thought you might want to see the adjustments." She gestured to the desk. "Let's take a look." He laid out the map overlays. "We're rerouting based on your Bravo 7 corridor suggestion. Also added predictive turbulence bands based on live wind data. It's less theoretical this time." She nodded, studying his work. "You're learning to trust the field, not just the numbers." "I'm trying," he said. "It's harder than I thought. The data looks clean until you realize reality doesn't care about your graphs." Maya smiled faintly. "Reality rarely does." He hesitated, then added, "I also included contingencies for pilot incapacitation. I figured you appreciate that one." For a moment she didn't respond. Her hand froze above the tablet screen. The memory hit her in silence, the heavy tilt of the helicopter, the smoke, Ramirez slumping forward, the feel of the controls shaking under her palms, the screaming radio. "Good addition," she said finally, voice quieter. Vance didn't press. He'd learned to recognize the pauses, the moments where memory replaced words. After a beat, Maya looked up again. "You're doing well, Lieutenant. Keep this pace and you'll be running briefings on your own before long." He smiled genuinely. "That's only because I have a good teacher." She raised an eyebrow. "Flattery doesn't earn you clearance, Lieutenant." "Was worth a shot," he said with a grin. Maya chuckled softly, shaking her head. It was a rare sound, even rarer in that room, but it broke the tension just enough to make both of them exhale. When Vance left, Maya leaned back in her chair, letting the silence settle again. She mentored before young medics, new pilots, even civilians, but this felt different. Guiding Vance was less about skill and more about character, teaching him how to carry pressure without breaking. She'd seen too many good people crumble not from combat, but from guilt, the invisible wounds command never documented. Later that morning, Reeves called her into his office. He was reading a report when she entered, but his eyes lifted immediately. "Maya, have a seat." "Sir." He gestured toward the open folder. "Training metrics are up across the board. Your coordination procedures cut mission prep time by nearly 40%. Teams adapting," she said. "They're starting to think operationally, not administratively." Reeves smiled faintly. "They're starting to think like you. That's a good thing." Maya didn't answer. She didn't take praise easily. Reeves continued, "You've also become somewhat of a moral compass around here." She frowned slightly. "Moral compass? People notice how you carry yourself," he said. "You don't bark orders. You don't chase recognition. You stay calm when everyone else is panicking. It's rare and it's contagious." "I'm just doing the job, sir." Reeves leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "You're doing more than that. You're changing how this unit defines leadership." She hesitated. "That's not intentional." "Doesn't have to be," Reeves said. "The best influence never is." He slid a folder toward her. "There's something else I wanted your input on. A field training operation next week, cross-branch coordination exercise. Joint task force with Air Force and Marines. I'd like you to oversee the planning." Maya glanced at the header, Operation Steel Veil. "Why me?" Reeves smiled. "Because they'll listen to you. You've done what they're pretending to simulate." She nodded slowly. "All right, I'll do it." "Good," Reeves said. "Briefing starts tomorrow at 900. Oh, and Vance will be assisting." "Perfect," she said. "He could use the experience." The next day's briefing filled the operations hall. Representatives from 3 branches sat around the main table, their uniforms a collage of colors and ranks. The air smelled faintly of coffee, paper, and tension, the usual scent of collaboration that hadn't yet earned trust. At the head of the table, Maya stood quietly as Reeves introduced her. "Senior Operations Coordinator Tours will be overseeing field coordination for this exercise," he said. "I suggest everyone pay attention, because she's the reason we have 6 soldiers alive who shouldn't be." The room fell silent. When Maya began, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Our objective," she said, "isn't to prove which branch operates better. It's to make sure that when something goes wrong, and it will, we know how to fix it together." She tapped the digital map. "This is a controlled exercise, but treat it like the real thing, because the habits you build in practice are the ones that save lives when it counts." An Air Force major leaned forward. "Ma'am, what are the threat parameters?" "Unpredictable," she said simply. "You'll be tested on adaptability and patience." He raised an eyebrow. "Patience, ma'am." She met his gaze. "Yes, most failures in the field don't happen because of bad intel. They happen because someone lost patience and broke formation." The major nodded, understanding. As the briefing continued, Maya outlined procedures, communication handoffs, medevac contingencies, signal verification layers. Her tone remained steady, unhurried, precise. Every line of instruction carried the weight of someone who'd seen what happens when those lines are ignored. Vance watched from the side, taking notes furiously. When the meeting ended, several officers approached her, respectful now, some even a little humbled. The Air Force major shook her hand. "Ma'am, I've been in planning for 15 years. Haven't heard it put that simply before. Thank you." "Simple saves lives," she said softly. After everyone dispersed, Vance lingered behind. "Ma'am," he said, "I noticed something during the exercise prep. Every time you talk about field decisions, you say we, not they." "Habit," she said. "I still think of myself as part of the field." He nodded. "You miss it." Maya didn't answer immediately. She turned toward the window where sunlight stretched across the tarmac. "You don't miss the danger," she said at last. "You miss the clarity. Out there, things are simple: survive, save, protect. Here, it's meetings and politics and second-guessing." "Sounds like you're still fighting, just on a different front," he said. She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but this one's quieter, and quieter wars last longer." That evening, after most of the building emptied, Maya stayed behind to finalize coordination logs. The hum of computers filled the silence. She leaned back in her chair, stretching, when her gaze caught on a file open on the corner of her desk. The after-action report from her final mission in Afghanistan. She hadn't meant to open it. It had come up automatically during a data sync. The words stared back like ghosts: crash landing, primary pilot incapacitated, 2 fatalities. Her chest tightened. She could still smell the smoke, feel the tilt, hear the screams. For 12 years she'd carried that night like a locked box, never opened, never shared. She told herself it didn't define her. But sometimes, when the room was too quiet, the lid cracked open on its own. She closed the file gently, pressing her hand against it for a moment before shutting down the screen. Then she whispered to the empty room, "You did what you could." It wasn't an excuse. It was a truth she needed to say out loud. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Chen. "Chen, heard about tomorrow's exercise. The team's excited. Also, we're grabbing coffee early if you want to join." Maya smiled faintly. "MT, maybe. I'll see how early I win the battle with paperwork." She set the phone aside, turning off the lights as she left. Outside, the base was quiet. A few lights flickered across the field. She walked slowly, breathing in the night air, the scent of fuel, dust, and damp grass. For the first time in a long while, she realized she wasn't carrying the weight alone anymore. The ghosts were still there. They always would be. But now there were voices beside them, living ones. People learning, listening, trying to be better because she was there. And maybe that was her new mission. Not flying, not rescuing, but passing on the calm she'd once had to earn the hard way. Because sometimes, saving people didn't mean pulling them from fire. Sometimes, it meant keeping them from walking into it in the first place. As she reached the end of the walkway, a helicopter lifted in the distance, blades glowing orange in the floodlights. She paused, watching it rise. Then, almost without realizing it, she whispered the old words again, half prayer, half vow. Night stalkers don't quit. And neither would she. What happens when training stops feeling like training? The morning of Operation Steel Veil broke over Fort Bragg in muted gold, quiet skies, calm air, the deceptive kind of peace that never lasts. In the operations center, the buzz of preparation filled the room. Maps flickered across screens, flight telemetry scrolled down side panels, and voices layered over each other in a controlled storm of technical chatter. Maya Torres stood at the head of it all, headset on, calm and steady. The teams had been briefed, the channels tested, the contingencies rehearsed. This was supposed to be routine, a cross-branch simulation designed to test joint communication protocols under pressure. A learning exercise, nothing more. At least that's how it began. "Flight control, this is operations," Maya said into her mic. "Confirm all units are online." "Copy, operations," came the reply. "All units active and ready. Simulated threat window begins in 10 minutes. Maya nodded to Vance across the room. "Run the synchronization check." "Yes, ma'am." He typed quickly, eyes scanning the stream of green code. "Everything looks clean. Satellite feed stable, comms clear, wind within parameters." "Good," she said. "Let's keep it that way." She moved toward the main console, her presence quietly anchoring the chaos. It was strange, she hadn't realized how much she'd missed this feeling. The pulse of coordination, the rhythm of command. She could almost hear the faint hum of helicopter blades somewhere in her memory. Reeves entered behind her, coffee in hand. "Morning tours, ready for the show." "As ready as I ever am," she replied. He smirked. "You sound more confident than I feel." She didn't look up. "Confidence is just practice calm, sir." "Then you've perfected it," Reeves said quietly, stepping aside. The countdown began. The big clock over the operation screen blinked from 00:09:00 to 00:00:00. "Simulation live," Vance called out. "Copy," Maya replied. "All teams, this is command. Begin sequence Alpha 1." And just like that, the training began. For the first 30 minutes, everything ran smoothly. The Army convoy advanced through simulated terrain. Air Force support maintained aerial overwatch. Marine recon units tracked digital markers across the valley display. Maya's instructions were short and measured. Adjust flight path 2 degrees north. Hold ground formation. Wait for confirmation before advancing. It was textbook, almost too perfect. Then the first flicker. "Ma'am," Vance said, frowning at his monitor. "I'm getting irregular data spikes from the drone relay. Looks like a signal overlap." "Source?" "Not sure. Could be just interference." She moved behind him, scanning the code. "Reroute signal through backup satellite." He complied, but the data spike didn't clear. Instead, the screen glitched once, twice, and a red indicator flashed across the top corner. "Unscheduled transmission, DATCTED." Vance's eyes widened. "Ma'am, that's not simulation code." Before Maya could respond, the comms channel erupted with static. Then a frantic voice cut through. "Command, this is Raven 4, taking actual fire. I repeat, live fire." Everyone froze. Reeves straightened instantly. "What the hell?" "Raven 4, confirm," Maya said sharply. "Is this part of simulation feed?" "Negative," the voice gasped. "We're at grid 469. Unknown hostiles, looks like militia. We thought they were role players, they're not." The room erupted into motion. Analysts scrambled to verify coordinates. Vance's fingers flew over the keyboard. "They're still within the exercise zone, ma'am, near the southern perimeter. But that's off limits for live engagement." Maya's tone stayed level. "Pull up drone feed now." The big screen shifted, grainy video appeared. Smoke, vehicles, small flashes of muzzle fire. The sounds of chaos bled faintly through the transmission. It wasn't training anymore. "Sir," Maya said, turning to Reeves, "we've got a real contact situation. At least 4 hostiles, possibly more. Raven teams pinned." Reeves' face hardened. "Local law enforcement." "They'll take too long," she said. "We're the only ones with comms and visuals right now." He hesitated. "Your call, Tors." She took a deep breath. "Vance, establish direct link with Raven 4. Tell them to mark their position with smoke. No return fire unless engaged." "Yes, ma'am." "Chen," Maya called, "get the standby Hello crews on alert. We might need real extraction." "Yes, ma'am." Maya leaned closer to the mic. "Raven 4, this is command. Hold your position. Air support inbound. Can you confirm any casualties?" Static then. "1 wounded, bleeding bad. We're low on supplies." Maya's jaw tightened. "Copy that. Keep pressure on the wound. You've got 3 minutes till visual support." She turned to Reeves. "We need a bird up now." He didn't hesitate. "Do it." "Flight control," Maya said. "Scramble Talon 3 for immediate launch. Non-simulated extraction, priority 1. "Copy operations," came the voice. "Bird prepping now." Maya stared at the feed. Smoke rising. Figures crouched behind overturned vehicles. Gunfire flashes like lightning in the distance. Her heart pounded, but her voice stayed steady. "Raven 4, she said. "This is command, help's coming, just hold." In those next few minutes, something shifted inside her. The walls of the operations center faded. The hum of electronics disappeared. All she could hear was the storm of memory, the whine of rotor blades, the chaos of field noise, the echo of her own heartbeat in her ears. She wasn't in an office anymore. She was back in the cockpit. "Altitude holding," she murmured unconsciously. "Wind shift 2 degrees south. Stay low, keep visual." Vance glanced at her, startled, realizing she was instinctively narrating like she was flying again. Then the comms crackled. "Talon 3 airborne, ETA 3 minutes." "Copy," Maya said, snapping back. "Approach corridor Bravo 7. Expect ground contact 2 clicks east. Visual markers red smoke." Outside, storm clouds began rolling over the horizon, dark, fast, threatening. The drone feed flickered again. the image jittering with static. "Ma'am," Vance said urgently, "the signal's degrading." "Keep it alive," Maya said. "We lose eyes, we lose them." "Working on it." Seconds stretched into minutes. Every heartbeat was a countdown. "Raven 4, visual confirmed," came the pilot's voice. "Taking small arms fire." "Copy Talon 3, Maya said. "Maintain hover. Load fast, low altitude. You have 40 seconds." "Roger that." On screen they saw it, the helicopter dropping into the chaos, rotor wash kicking up dirt and debris. Figures ran toward it, dragging the wounded. Gunfire sparked around them. 30 seconds, Maya murmured. "Come on." The feed cut. For a split second, the room went silent. Then static burst. "Talon 3 to command. We have them, all aboard, pulling out." A collective exhale swept the room. "Good work," Maya said, voice soft. "Returning to base," the pilot said. "Wounded stable." Reeves turned to Maya, shaking his head slowly. "You just turned a training day into a real rescue. Again." She gave a small, tired smile. "Habit, sir." He almost laughed, but there was awe in his eyes. "You know, Tors, I think the universe sends you crises just to see what calm looks like under fire." "Maybe it just knows I'll pick up the call," she said quietly. Vance sank into his chair, adrenaline still pumping. "Ma'am, how do you stay that composed? I thought my heart was going to explode." Maya looked at him, her gaze steady but kind. "You don't control fear, Lieutenant. You ride it until it stops shaking. The trick isn't staying calm, it's sounding like you are until everyone else believes it." He nodded slowly, absorbing every word. Hours later, when the rescue team arrived back on base, Maya went down to the flight line. The rotors were still spinning when she stepped into the night air, wind pulling at her hair and sleeves. The helicopter door opened. 2 medics carried a stretcher. Behind them, a soldier limped out, the team leader. He stopped when he saw her. "Your command." She nodded. "We heard your call." He extended a shaky hand. "Ma'am, we thought it was a drill, didn't realize until the first rounds hit." Maya took his hand firmly. "You did what you were trained to do, survive." He exhaled, nodding. "Thank you for getting us out." She looked at the wounded being loaded into a medical truck. "It wasn't me. It was your people and a pilot who refused to quit." The soldier managed a small, tired smile. "Sounds like you've done this before." "Once or twice," she said softly. He didn't need to know how many times. As the helicopter powered down, the sound faded into the kind of silence only soldiers understand, the silence after noise, when relief and exhaustion blur together. Maya stood there a while, watching the medics work, the lights flickering across their faces. Reeves approached from behind, voice low. "You saved them." "So did everyone else," she said. "That's how it works." He nodded. "Still that instinct, that leadership, you can't teach that." "Sure you can," she said quietly. "You just have to live long enough to remember the lessons." They stood there together, the night air cool and heavy. Finally Reeves said, "You've still got the heart of a pilot, Tors." She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I've got better visibility from here." Reeves chuckled. "Don't ever lose that calm, we need it." She looked back toward the landing pad where Talon 3 rested in silence. "Calm's easy, Colonel. It's what comes after that's hard." Because she knew, when the noise stopped, when the mission ended, the mind starts replaying everything that almost went wrong. But that was the price of leadership, the cost of care. As she walked back toward the operations building, the floodlights hummed overhead, illuminating her path. Every echo of her boots carried quiet assurance. She wasn't running from her ghosts anymore. She was walking beside them. And for the first time in years, that felt like peace. Why do some names linger longer than medals? A week after the incident, Fort Bragg was calm again, the kind of calm that hides how close chaos had come. For most, the event was already fading into the background noise of military routine. Another report filed, another lesson logged. But for Maya Torres, it wasn't over, not yet. Because the quiet after action always carried a weight of its own. That evening she stood at the edge of the airfield, the sky painted in fading amber. The air was heavy with that familiar blend oil, dust, jet fuel memory. Far across the tarmac, she could see the hangars lined like silent sentinels, helicopters resting under covers like sleeping giants. Vance approached slowly, holding a small folder under his arm. "Ma'am," he said, a little hesitant, "Colonel Reeves asked me to bring this to you. He said you'd probably understand why." She turned, accepting it without a word. Inside was a single document, Recommendation for Commendation, Civilian Operations Coordinator Maya Torres. At the bottom, in Reeves's handwriting, was one sentence. For composure under pressure, decisive leadership, and the rescue of U.S. personnel during a live-fire incident misidentified as training. Maya stared at it for a moment, then closed the folder. "Tell the colonel I appreciate it," she said quietly. "You're not going to accept it." She smiled faintly. "You don't accept calm, you practice it." He nodded, understanding more than he might have a few months ago. They stood together for a while, watching a bird lift in the distance, blades flashing gold in the evening sun. After a long silence, he said, "I heard there's a memorial service tomorrow, for the anniversary of the Nightstalker crash, the one 12 years ago." Maya's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "Yeah," she said softly, "I know." "You knew some of them, didn't you?" Her answer was almost a whisper. "I was one of them." The next morning was gray and still, the kind of overcast that made everything sound softer. The Special Operations Memorial sat at the far end of the base, a curved wall of black stone engraved with names. No music, no speeches, just quiet footsteps and the soft rustle of uniforms as soldiers, airmen, and pilots came to pay respects. Maya arrived early, her steps slow, deliberate. She wasn't wearing dress blues or formal insignia, just a plain black coat and a small Nightstalker pin at her collar. She paused at the wall, tracing her eyes across the names. Ramirez, Holt, Dennison. She exhaled. There it was, the part of her life the world thought had ended in that crash. The stone was cold under her fingertips. She remembered every detail of that night, the smell of burning fuel, the taste of metal, the weight of silence after the last transmission. She survived, but survival hadn't felt like victory. It had felt like debt. A soft voice broke her thoughts. "You must have known them." She turned slightly. An older man stood nearby, gray hair, navy jacket, slow but steady posture. "I did," she said. He nodded. "My son was on that mission, Sergeant Holt." She looked back at the wall. He was one of the bravest. The man's eyes softened. "They told me someone tried to take control of the bird after the pilot was hit. That's why a few of them made it. You wouldn't know who that was, would you?" Maya paused. She could have lied or stayed silent. But something in his face, the quiet ache of years without closure, made her answer. "It was me," she said softly. He stared at her, eyes wet. You were on that bird." She nodded once. "We lost altitude fast. Ramirez was hit. Holt helped me pull him back. He didn't stop until the very end." The old man blinked hard, holding onto every word. "They said whoever took over saved 3 others before the fire spread." Maya's voice caught slightly. "He was one of them, you should know that." The man swallowed, nodding slowly. "I always wondered who to thank." Maya met his gaze. "You just did." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that holds both grief and peace at once. "You carry yourself like someone who still hears them." She looked back at the wall. "Every day." The man placed a small coin at the base of the stone, the kind given to families of fallen operators. Then he said, quietly, "If you ever feel like they're gone, they're not. They just flew ahead." And then he walked away, leaving her alone again with the names. When the crowd thinned, Maya stayed. She crouched near the base of the wall, tracing her hand along the lower section, where newer engravings shimmered faintly. She didn't cry, she just breathed. Because sometimes grief isn't tears, it's breath. The proof that you're still here when someone else is. As she stood, Reeves appeared behind her, hat in hand. "Didn't expect to see you here this early," he said softly. "I didn't expect to stay this long," she replied. He nodded, glancing at the wall. "You flew with them, didn't you?" "Yes, sir." "Thought so," he said quietly. "The way you handled that last mission, it wasn't strategy, it was memory." She didn't answer, but he could see the truth in her silence. After a pause, he said, "You know, the younger officers, they talk about you. They call you the calm in the storm." She smiled faintly. "Better than what they used to call me." "What was that?" She looked out at the horizon. "A ghost." Reeves smiled, setting his hat back on. "Well, this ghost just saved 6 soldiers and reminded half this base what leadership looks like. You should come to the debrief next week, share what you know." "I'll think about it," she said. He nodded, understanding the coded answer for not yet. As he walked away, Maya stood for a moment longer, eyes scanning the names one last time. Then she whispered under her breath, "You didn't die for nothing." Later that afternoon, she sat alone in her office. The window overlooked the same runway she'd once flown from. But now, instead of wind and chaos, she saw stillness, a different kind of horizon. On her desk lay the unopened commendation letter. She stared at it for a while, then quietly folded it and slipped it into her journal, the one she never showed anyone. Between the pages, she'd written notes, names and quotes from people she'd lost and people she'd led. It wasn't a diary, it was a promise. Outside, the faint sound of rotors echoed, another flight, another generation taking off. Maya stood, watching the helicopter rise, silhouetted against the sinking sun. The same machine that once nearly took her life, now symbolized everything she'd tried to protect. She whispered, not to the pilots but to the memory of those who'd flown before. "Keep them steady." That evening the base held a small informal gathering, nothing ceremonial, just soldiers and staff at the canteen, trading stories. Laughter, clinking glasses, the kind of release that only comes after tension breaks. Vance spotted her at a corner table and walked over. "Ma'am," he said, smiling a little, "we're celebrating you whether you like it or not." She gave a quiet laugh. "Then at least make it about the team." He pulled up a chair. "You know, I used to think leadership was about being the loudest voice in the room. And now—" he thought for a moment. "Now, I think it's about being the calmest when everything's falling apart." She nodded, pleased. "That's the lesson most don't learn until it's too late." He grinned. "Well, I had a good teacher." Maya raised her cup, not a toast, just acknowledgement. "To the ones who taught us both." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the noise of the room fading into background hum. When she finally stood to leave, Vance asked, "Ma'am, do you ever think you'll go back up there, fly again?" She smiled, small, knowing. "Every day I'm here, I already am." He watched her go, realizing he'd just witnessed the quiet kind of greatness, the kind that doesn't demand a salute, yet earns one anyway. Outside, the night was deep and clear. The stars cut sharp lines through the darkness. Maya walked toward the runway one last time, the sound of her boots echoing softly. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter lifted, its blades slicing through the air like memory returning home. She stopped, watching it rise until it disappeared into the clouds. And for a moment, just a moment, she could almost hear their voices again. Ramirez, Holt, Dennison. Laughing, teasing, alive. She smiled faintly, eyes glistening under the dim floodlights. Then she whispered to them, to herself, to every silent name etched in the dark. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And with that, Maya Torres, Valkyrie 1, turned from the runway and walked back into the quiet night. Not to escape her past, but to carry it forward. Because leadership wasn't about orders or medals or ranks. It was about how you stood when the world expected you to fall.